Next.js static site generation revalidation. So essentially what you want to do is you want to have like a static blog post or a static index of blog posts, and then you want to be able to revalidate it on demand each time that you update a new blog post. Now, for this, we're going to be using Ghost. So I've gone ahead and set up here a Ghost environment. I've deployed a Ghost environment. And if you don't know how to do this, let me know in the comments below, because I'm more than happy to show you exactly how to do this. And I've also gone ahead and set up here a Next.js environment. So I've deployed the Next.js application to DigitalOcean. And also, if you don't know how to do this, I leave a link somewhere here on top after this live video on exactly how to do this, because I've recorded a couple of days ago a video showing you exactly step by step how to deploy a Next.js application without Vercel. So again, what we're going to do in this live video is I'm going to show you exactly how we can go ahead here and update one of these posts, and then we want to be able to update them right over here. Now, I'm going to start by showing you exactly what the process is at this moment and exactly why we need to do this. So if we come here to coming soon, so this is a default blog post that comes with Ghost each time that we spin up a new instance. And if I go ahead and update it, so for the moment, it should not update, right? Oh, actually it updated because I think I forgot to delete this configuration right over here. I apologize for this. So I'm just going to go over back here. I'm going to add in here coming soon. I'm going to update. So this should be the final, actually the final behavior of this application. But for the moment, I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to delete this integration. And now I'm going to go back here. As you can see, it updated back to coming soon. And once I go here now, because I've deleted the webhook, if I update the post, it should stay the same. As you can see, if we refresh here the page, it will not update. Now, our behavior, again, the behavior that we want is we want each time that we update same kind of content on Ghost, we want a Ghost webhook, and I'm going to show you exactly all the available events. So we want on the post added, so each time that we add a post, each time that we delete a post, and each time that we edit a post, we want to send a webhook to Next.js telling Next.js exactly what post was updated, and also we need to update the entire index of Next.js. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and share with you here exactly what I'm doing here on VS Code. So I've gone ahead and set up an empty project with TypeScript. So at the moment, this doesn't have anything. I've also gone ahead and set up Tailwind because I want to more or less have a nice looking website, which is the website that we just saw a few moments ago. And I'm going to start by deleting here this part of the code, and I'm also going to go ahead and delete this part of the code. And I'm also going to add in here a main tag. And now our website is cleaned up. And if I go ahead in here and I spin up here the development environment, and if I go ahead and share with you here my terminal, we can navigate here to localhost 3000. And as you can see, the create Next.js app is currently running, but it doesn't have anything because I deleted the entire HTML. Now, I'm going to go ahead and share again with you here. Or actually, I'm going to keep here because I want to talk before we start with the code also about the content API. So what we're going to do specifically is we're going to fetch the posts, we're going to fetch all of the posts, and then we're also going to have one page that is going to have each one of the individual posts with the content, with the HTML inside of a tag. And in this case, with also the title. So as you can see here, the path and the version to be able to fetch the Ghost content via an API is going to be Ghost/API/version. In this case, we're going to be using the version number 4. And then we need to fetch here the content. And we're also going to add a /posts because we want to integrate more specifically with the post. Now I'm going to go ahead, and before starting with all of this, I'm going to also go ahead here and move this back to coming soon. So this is now saving, it is now published, and I'm going to start by creating here an integration endpoint. So as you can see here, Ghost allows us to have multiple integrations that they've pre-built, more in a way, they've pre-built all of these integrations so that we can integrate with Ghost. So for example, if you're aware of Ulysses, it is a Mac OS writing app that you can use to write. You can also integrate it with Discuss, with Analytics, with Google Analytics. So there's a bunch of built-in integrations. But what we want to do is we want to come down here and we want to add a custom Ghost integration. So go ahead and click here on this button. And then we want to call this one NextJS integration. So this was the one that I've already created before recording this live video. And this was the one that was set up that I've deleted, but I'm going to show you exactly step by step how to do this. So go ahead, give it a name here, and then click on create. After we do this, as you can see here, we have a bunch of things right over here. We have here the content API key, and we also have here an admin API key. Now, the API that we want to use is the content API key. So I'm going to simply go ahead, and now I need to come here to VS Code just to check something really quickly. And I'm going to copy here the key of the Ghost content API. And now I'm going to move here back to the terminal to VS Code. So I'm going to come here and I need to create a new file that is going to be called .env.local. And this is essentially a file that is going to set up all of our environment keys so that we do not expose on our code this API key. Now I've pasted in here Ghost Content API, and this is going to be the name of the environment variable. And now I'm going to go ahead and copy from Ghost into here the environment variable that we're going to be using. So as you can see right now, I've pasted this in here, and now we have here the Ghost Content API key, which is this one. And I'm going to also go ahead and move back here to the browser, and as you can see, it is the exact same one that we just saw on VS Code. Now, I'm going to go back here, and we need to start by setting up exactly our code, and now we need to start with the following. We need to start by setting up in here essentially our posts index. So we want to be able to map through an array of posts and then display what the post title is, also what the excerpt is. So we want to have an excerpt, and then we also want to be able to show the button that is going to send us to the exact to that specific blog post. I'm going to start by exporting here a constant named getStaticProps. And this is going to be a function that is going to return exactly what this tells, the props. So this is getStaticProps, and it is going to return the props with our post. So for now, we're going to leave this as an empty object. And then we need to go ahead and fetch these props from our Ghost environment. So I'm going to go back to our browser. And inside of here, as you can see, we have here the API URL. And then, as I've told you just a few seconds ago, we also want to add in here this part of the URL. We want to append this to our URL so we can then be able to go ahead and fetch our content. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to copy this. I can add it, for example, here on top. And then I can add in here Ghost API. This is going to be the version number 4, and then content and posts. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL over here. And this is the URL that we're going to be using in order to fetch posts from the API. Now, in order to be able to authenticate with Ghost, we are not going to pass anything into the headers, but rather we're going to pass it via a key param. So I'm going to show you exactly now what I mean by this. So here inside of Next.js, I'm going to just stop here I'm going to stop the server just for a few seconds, and then I'm going to add in here Axios. Now I'm going to use Axios in order to be able to fetch something from our Ghost environment. And with that, we can now go ahead and say here, our posts equals Axios. We also need to go ahead and import Axios from Axios. And then we're going to be using the get method. And this means that we need to go ahead and fetch all that data using a get method again from Ghost. I'm going to paste in here this exact URL that I've just showed you. And then, like I told you, we need to add in here to the params. So this is going to be a URL parameter. So if you've seen, for example, the end result is going to be like this. So a question mark and key equals, and then Axios is automatically going to insert all of this into this URL automatically when we pass in here this value to the params. So we're going to add in here the key, and we're going to be using process.env. So this allows us to access our environment variables. And then we're going to be using here this key, which is called Ghost Content API. Now this has to be posts. And then after we get our response back from Ghost, we need to go ahead and also access our data and then the data post. So I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by this. So we need in here to add then. So we're accessing in here the response object, and then we want the response.data.post. So this is going to essentially return to us from the data object the post, because when Ghost returns to us the JSON object, it will have a post key with all of the posts as an array. So now we can go ahead and delete this over here. And we can also go ahead and do the following. So now I'm going to go ahead and copy here a piece of code that is going to allow us to essentially have types inside of this project. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and type all of this manually because I think that wouldn't really be using this time very effectively. So since I'm just here to teach you exactly how to integrate this and how to revalidate it on Next.js, I'm simply going to paste this in here, and I'm going to pass in here the props. So what this essentially means is that I've gone ahead and I've copied here a post type, and then I've told here TypeScript that the props includes inside of the props object a key that's posts, and then it is an array of the type post. So now, as you can see, if we just type here p, as you can see, they tell us here that we have all of the posts. Now, if we go ahead and we console log all of our posts, just to make sure that the environment is running, and now I'm going to go back here to the terminal. I'm going to refresh here, and something is not right, so just let me check really quickly. Oh, that's exactly right. So I forgot to add a sync and await to this code. So I'm going to go back here to this one. And we need to also add in here a sync and await. So essentially, this is a promise. Axios needs to, first of all, wait for the response from the service, and only after that. So since this is not synchronous code, this is asynchronous code, we need to add in here also await. And now we should be good to go. So if now I go back here to the browser, if I inspect in here this code, and if I refresh, as you can see, we have now here an array of posts, which at the moment only has one post, which is the one that Ghost creates by default. So now we can continue with this process. So let's go back to our terminal, to our to VS Code. And now the next thing that we want to do is we want to display here all of our posts. So again, because I'm not here to teach you about HTML or I think you wouldn't be really using your time very effectively by just watching me type, I'm simply going to go ahead in here and I'm going to copy here a piece of code, and then I'm going to paste it in here on our terminal. I'm also going to import here the next link, and I'm going to show you exactly what's happening in here. So I have here a few HTML tags with Tailwind. If you're interested in learning more about Tailwind CSS, let me know in the comments because I can make a video specifically about this. But essentially what's happening is we have here a grid of posts. So this is going to be just of 2 columns. So it is going to have 2 columns, then 2 columns if we have multiple posts. And then inside of here, we're simply mapping through our posts array. So this means that we're mapping through each one of those posts. And then we're passing in here a key with the post ID, which is unique. And then we also are going to pass in here the post title, the post excerpt, and also the read more button. So here's exactly what this looks like in the end. So if we go back here to our browser, as you can see, we have in here this piece of lorem ipsum text that I've added. We also have here posts, and then we have in here coming soon. This is a NextJS revalidation demo, brand new site by Manual Tourist that's just getting started. So now let's go ahead and also add another post. So I'm going to simply search here for lorem ipsum. I'm going to generate here a piece of lorem ipsum text. I'm going to copy this. And then if we go back here to our post, we can simply go ahead and add in here, let's call this one lorem ipsum, and paste this in here. Now I'm going to publish this one. Now this is saving, and it is now published. Now, if we go back here to our local Next.js instance, you're going to see something happening. If I go ahead and refresh, you're going to see that this post already appears here without me doing anything. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this already automatic revalidation? But it is not. Since I'm running this inside of a node environment as inside basically a development environment, this is not, this is each time that we refresh our page, this is going to go ahead and fetch that API each time that we want to do this. But since we want to, again, have a static website that is going to simply fetch from the server the HTML and the JSON, and that has to each time be static in order to make sure that our website is fast, not only for the user experience, but also for SEO. Since we want to do that, this will not happen automatically. And that's exactly what we want to do right now. So I'm going to show you exactly here what we're going to do. We need to add in here an API. And actually before this, I just need to show you exactly what I'm doing inside of VS Code. Because before this, we also want to add in here one additional page inside of the post folder. And we're going to call this one slug a TSX. So this is again a TypeScript project with JSX. So the reason I'm adding in here slug is because this is going to be the key that I need to pass to Next.js so it knows exactly what page it needs to fetch. So here's exactly what I mean by this. So first of all, let's start by defining here the page. So I'm going to call this one post. And then we need to return in here a piece of HTML. I'm going to leave this like this, and then we also need to export default our post. So now inside of this page, we need to do 2 different things. We first of all need to fetch using the method of getStaticProps our props, and we also need to fetch using the getStaticPaths, which is separate from props, in order to tell Next.js what all our paths. So essentially, we want to tell Next.js this is the list of paths that exist in this website on this exact page. And if someone goes ahead and visits a post that doesn't exist in this list, then you want to return a 404 error. And again, each time that we either create, update, or delete a post, we want to be able to tell Next.js, hey, something changed, something different is now available on the website. So please go ahead and fetch the index of posts, and also go ahead and fetch this particular post. And we're going to do that by telling Next.js to revalidate the post index and a specific post. So I'm going to go ahead and start by writing in here, again, export const getStaticProps. And then, just like before, we want to make sure that we're returning in here a props object. Now, inside of this props object, we want to make sure that we return, again, simply just the post. So actually, no, in this getStaticProps object, we want to return one single post, and inside the getStaticPaths, we want to return multiple posts. So here's exactly how we're going to do this. We need to pass in the slug to Ghost. So here's exactly how we're going to do this. We need to add in here post, and then we're going to fetch here from Axios. We're going to pass in here get, and then I'm going to go back here and simply copy this code. I think it's better than that. And now in here inside of this, instead of having post, we're going to call this one post. And we want to access the first item of this array. And here's exactly why this is. We're going to pass to Ghost a slug param. So just like this param in here, we can also pass a param that's called slug, which tells Ghost exactly what our slug is. So I'm also going to pass in here the type of getStaticProps. And then we need to access in here the context. Now, this context object right over here is the context that Next.js provides us, essentially to be able to access this slug thing right over here. So we need to now say in here that the constant of slug equals context.params. And since this might be an unified object, we need to also do this. We need to make sure that it exists. And then we want to access .params.slug, which again is going to be the parameter that Next.js is going to send us, telling us exactly what someone typed in their browser after the post path. Now, with this in mind, we need to now go ahead and return. We also need to add in here the slug, which I almost forgot. And now with slug in here added, we can pass in here the post. I'm also going to go ahead, which I've already done. I've already exported here the post type, which I think I might need to actually rename. Let's just call this one tpost, and this one tpost. And now we can go ahead and tell Next.js that tell TypeScript that this is a next page. We're going to import it. And then we're going to pass in here the props, and then the interface of name props is going to have one post, which is of type post, actually tpost. So this now has imported this type, so we can access all of these values with using TypeScript and make sure that we do not forget, we don't mistakenly type, for example, a title. If you add like to is at the end or something like that, TypeScript will tell you that you made a mistake, which is great for us. So now I'm going to pass in here the post. And now I also want to come in here and console log the post. So now let's go ahead and go back to the terminal, to our browser, and see if this post is actually fetching from our database, so from the Ghost API actually, and if this is actually showing. So if I go ahead and paste in here post, and just to let you know exactly what I'm doing, if you go back here to the coming soon post, and if you see here, this is the slug that Ghost is going to return to us. So I'm simply going to go ahead and copy that, and I'm going to try and navigate to posts and then coming soon. So now it tells here getStaticPaths. That's right, I forgot about the getStaticPaths, which should be done before we actually do this. So now let's go ahead and do the exact same thing, but for getStaticPaths. And we need to return in here. We also need to make sure that this is asynchronous so that we can use await. And I'm simply going to copy this code right over here. I'm going to paste it in here. And this is going to again be called posts because we want to fetch all of our posts to tell Next.js all of the paths that are available for people to navigate to and to see pages. And we also want to make sure that we delete this thing right over here so that we are sure that it is again returning an array of posts and not only one post. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to return an object that includes params. So we want to pass an object that has the key of params, which are again the parameters that Next.js needs to access. And then inside of that object, we need to return the slug. So we're going to simply type in here an object, a constant that is going to be called paths, and we're going to map over these posts. And you also need to add in here the posts, which are of type post. So this essentially tells, again, TypeScript that we are going to be receiving here an array of posts. And then we're going to loop over this and return an object, again, with params, with the key of params. And inside of here, we need to pass the slug, which is the post dot slug. So again, because we're using TypeScript, we have all of this here already available to us. So I can simply go ahead and pick from the menu, and then I simply need to return this in here. Now we also need to go ahead and add in here fallback false. And here's exactly why we need to do this. We need to do this because usually what happened before on Next.js is that each time that someone went ahead and visited a page that didn't exist before they had this API to revalidate on demand, usually what would happen is that if the page didn't exist, Next.js would go ahead and try to refetch, to fetch that page, see if it exists, and show a loading spinner to someone. Now, if the page already existed, they wouldn't go ahead and do this. They would automatically, so Next.js would automatically um, show the existing page to your visitor. But now with this on-demand technology, with this on-demand ability that we have to revalidate our posts, we don't need to do this because each time again that we create, delete, or update a post, we can simply tell Next.js, hey, go ahead, refetch all of this and keep this as static to make sure that it is as fast as possible to all of our visitors. So that's the reason why we are adding in here fallback false. Now, with this in mind, let's go ahead and now move back to our browser and see if we now are able to actually see our pages. Yeah, so again, this is now here coming soon. As you can see, it now shows us unavailable, just a blank slate in here, and that's because the HTML is empty. And if we go back here to our console and we console log, as you can see, we have in here our object, which is the coming soon post. Now, just to make sure that you understand exactly what's happening here, if I do the exact same thing here for the lorem ipsum post, I go ahead and change this to lorem ipsum. As you can see, instead of fetching the coming soon, it is fetching the lorem ipsum with the HTML and all of that good stuff. So now we can go ahead and actually add in here a piece of HTML, which again, I'm simply going to just copy and paste because I don't want you to see me just typing HTML, which again, I don't think would be really a great use of your time. So let's go back to VS Code, and I'm simply going to go ahead, delete this piece of code, and I'm going to paste this in here. I'm also going to go ahead and remove here the console log. And now, here's exactly what's happening here. So as you can see, again, just a piece of, these are just classes with Tailwind CSS in order to make sure that the site looks more or less good. And then we pass in here our post.title, which is the title of the post. And then we also need to add in here as a dangerous set inner HTML, and we need to pass in here our HTML. Now, the reason we are doing this, and we are not simply doing, let's say that you could go ahead and do something like post.html, is because this would then go ahead and show all of the p tags and the div tags and all of that stuff, which is not what we want. Usually React.js escapes all of our HTML in order to make sure that our code is safe. But since this HTML comes from a trusted source, from our Ghost website, and make sure that the content is not published by someone that you don't know. So I'm assuming that you are the owner of this Ghost instance. So with that in mind, that's the reason that we are doing this. That's the reason we are passing here dangerously set inner HTML. So now with this HTML setup, I'm going to go back to our browser, and as you can see, we now are able to see our post. And also, if I go back here and I try and click here on one of these buttons, as you can see, it went ahead. And something I think might not be right. Let me just check. So this is the coming soon. She's navigating to the coming soon, and the coming soon is also returning the lorem ipsum, which I'm not really sure why this is happening. Let's just debug this for a second and see exactly why this is happening. So I'm fetching in here getStaticProps. So I'm fetching the post, and I'm passing a slug. Okay. So now I'm just checking for a second because I'm not sure exactly why this is happening. So this is when fetching here the coming soon post, this is passing the lorem ipsum. And also when I fetch the lorem ipsum, it is passing the lorem ipsum. So let's just go back here to our VS Code instance and see exactly what might be happening. So here on the getStaticPaths, everything is good. And in here, I'm simply going to try and do the following. Instead of passing it here to the params, I'm going to try and go ahead and do this and add this in here. Oh, now I know, yeah. So instead of adding in here posts, we also need to pass in here slug. So usually by default, and I totally forgot about this, so I apologize. But when fetching from Ghost, by default, if we simply pass in post and then the slug, and then the something, so let's say that we paste in here one, this would go ahead and fetch the ID. Now, because we are actually passing the slug shouldn't be passed as a param, but actually in here part of the entire URL. So I'm going to simply go ahead and do this, and then we need to make sure that it is like this. So again, the reason that it was showing the lorem ipsum on all of the pages is because we are accessing here the first item of the array, and since we didn't tell Ghost in a correct manner exactly how to fetch that slug, because of that reason, it went ahead and fetched the first post, which is the last one that we published, the lorem ipsum one. So now let's go back here to the browser and see if this is corrected. So now if you navigate here to the coming soon post, now this is working, and now we are seeing in here coming soon. And if we go back here and we navigate to the lorem ipsum, it is showing us the lorem ipsum one. Now we can continue. So we are now done with all of these getStaticProps, getStaticPaths, all of that stuff, and we can now go ahead and set up our code that is going to allow us to revalidate. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to use the API methods that Next.js provides us, and then we need to also set up a key to make sure that this API endpoint isn't being hit by someone just publicly on the internet. And then we want to also pass to Next.js and tell Next.js exactly what the slug is that we want to refresh, to make sure that it doesn't revalidate each single one post. And you also want to, again, revalidate the entire index. So let's go ahead and simply add in here a new endpoint called revalidate. I'm also going to go ahead and simply copy this thing right over here to avoid rewriting all of this by hand. I'm also going to go ahead and delete that and add in here a return. So now what we want to do again is we want to simply go ahead and check for the key. We want to also go ahead and revalidate the index and the post. So I'm simply going to go ahead and copy here the piece of code that we need in order to make sure that this is happening. And then I'm going to explain it to you step by step exactly what's happening. And now I realized that I forgot to show you my my VS Code instance. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to re-explain everything. So we're going to create in here inside of the API folder a revalidate file, and then we need to add in here essentially an export default async function with the handler. And then we're going to pass in here the request and the response, which is then going to return to the Next.js API endpoint a response. So here's exactly what's happening in here. First of all, we need to go ahead and set up a process environment, which we're actually going to do right now before we continue, to make sure that I don't forget. So let's go ahead and set up in here the revalidate API key. And we're going to set up this API key as the following. So I'm going to simply copy here an API key that I've previously created. And I'm now going to paste this in here. Now we can move back here to this file. And again, we're importing here the type of Next.js API request, Next API response from Next. And then we're simply passing in here a default function. We're exporting it as default. The handler request, then we pass, we also need the response object, and we're good to go. And also this, we need to make sure that this export default async function, just like that. So again, that we are able to make a request and return a promise from that request. So just a second, I just need to and now we can continue. Okay, so again, in here, we are essentially telling Next.js if our request.query that key, and we're going to use more or less of the same process as Ghost. So we're going to pass in a key via the params, and then we're going to tell Next.js if this key is different from the key that we have inside our process environment. So if this is different from the key that we have available to us inside our environment, then we want to return a message that tells that simply says unauthorized. So we just want to say to someone that is trying to do this, it is unauthorized. We don't really need to tell them why it is unauthorized, what exactly is going wrong, since this is usually going to be a very private API that we're not really going to share with a lot of people. And then we simply need to go ahead and create in here a try and catch block. So this is going to try this, and if any kind of error happens in here, it is going to pass in here the error, and then it is going to return simply a message that says error revalidating. So now let's go ahead and see exactly what's happening in here. So in order to make sure that we are able to revalidate, we want to write await. So this needs to await for Next.js to end this and then return a promise, and that's why we need to write in here wait. And then we need to access the response object. And then inside the response object, you want to go ahead and type unstable underscore revalidate. Now, the reason this is called unstable is because at the moment Next.js still has this in beta, but I believe, and I've tried this, I really think that this is more stable than a lot of code that I've seen on different frameworks. So with that in mind, we simply need to go ahead and now passing here the URL path as a string. And just like I've told you, we need to pass in two different ones. So we need to pass in here the index one, which in this case is simply the localhost 3000. And then we also want to pass in here the post, and we also want to access the object that that Ghost gives us. So Ghost gives us essentially inside of the body, they give us a post key, and then we have the current and the previous. Now we don't really care about the previous since we are not going to look for a previous post and then make sure that only that one is updated. We are simply going to pass in the slug to Next.js and tell Next.js to go ahead and refetch this exact slug. So now, with this in mind, we're going to simply pass in here request.body.post.current.slug. So this is essentially going to tell, again, Next.js that we want to revalidate both of these pages. And then we're going to simply return back in here a message that says post with slug. And then we're going to let us know what the slug is, and post index were successfully revalidated. And if any kind of mistake or error happens, then we want to go ahead and again simply say that error revalidating. If you want to make sure that you're passing the error to let you know and or your team know exactly what the error is, then you can go ahead and do that. But for this example, I'm not going to do it. So now let's go ahead and move back to so I need to make sure that it is like this. Okay, so now let's go back to our browser and go ahead and set up our endpoints. Now here's exactly what I mean by this. Now we already have a way for Next.js to fetch our posts, so the index of the posts, and we also have a way for Next.js to fetch each one of the individual posts. Now, here's exactly what's missing. So the next thing and the last thing that is missing is that we want to tell Ghost, so each time that we update, we create or we delete, we want Ghost to be able to send, to hit this endpoint and be able to fetch that, to essentially tell Next.js, here's exactly what happened, something changed, so go ahead and revalidate it. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you in here, like I told you, I've already gone ahead and set up in here an instance with Next.js and with all of this code that I've showed you. So I'm not going to go ahead and show you everything that is inside of the server, since all of this code is essentially the exact same code that I've just showed you, and then I've just gone ahead and told you exactly why we are adding that code. So now the next step is simply for us to come here to Next.js integration and add a couple of webhooks. Now, let's go back here to the documentation of Ghost about webhooks, and we want to make sure again that we are sending, so we are hitting that API endpoint each time that this is added, posted, added, deleted, or edited. So let's go ahead and here on the add webhook, so you want to go ahead and click on that button. And now we want to make sure that we select here post created, and let's simply call this one also post created. And now in here, we want to make sure that we add our target URL. Now, just like I've told you, I've already gone ahead and set up here an instance with essentially the same code that I've set up just a few seconds ago and that I've showed you. And so we simply need to pass in here now the URL of our Next.js instance. And then we also need to pass the API path. And then inside of the API path, we want to here okay, so we also need to go ahead and set up our key. Now, just like I've told you, we are also going to go ahead and pass in a key. And because of that, we need to also add it in here, because if we don't have it, we're going to simply get an unauthorized message back. And this is all going to not work. So I'm going to simply go ahead and copy the key. and I'm going to paste in here our key. Now I'm also going to go ahead and do the exact same thing, but for the post updated and for the post deleted. All right. So now I've gone ahead and I've done this. And before we go ahead and we continue, I just want to show you here on Insomnia. So I'm going to open my API client. So we can go ahead and fetch this API and make sure that this is working before we continue. So I'm going to simply go ahead and share screen. All right. So now I'm going to move this back here. And now, as you can see, we have here Insomnia, which is going to allow us to essentially revalidate to essentially test our endpoint. So just like I've showed you, in here we have Next.js /demo.webdev.com/API/revalidate, and then we need to pass in here our key. Now, we also need to pass in here this object. So this is mimicking essentially what Ghost is going to do when sending that webhook API request. And then each time that we go ahead and we do the following, so we've just had an error here revalidating, and I'm not really sure why. Let me just check. Oh yeah, so the key is essentially working because we got back an error validating message. So I need to simply go back here and make sure that this is working. Okay, so I'm going to SSH, and I apologize because I'm doing this live and I'm doing this and I'm getting a lot of errors while doing this live, but I hope that this is still helpful for you. And actually, when developing and when doing development stuff, this is usually what happens. We usually get a lot of errors, we'll get a lot of mistakes, and that's just uh, part of it. So let's simply go ahead and go here to our pages. And then I want to make sure that I take a look here at revalidate. So request.current.post.slug. Okay, so this is working. And so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this is also working. So we are getting an error. I'm not really sure why. So I'm going to try and restart here my Next.js demo instance. Make sure that I see exactly why this is happening. Still not working. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do a bit of debugging. So I'm going to just go ahead and show you here. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this. I'm also going to go ahead and show you here So I'm going to just go ahead so you can now see me. So again, Next.js, contrarily to what happens on WordPress, doesn't make you use always go back to the database and ask for the data. Now I understand that Next.js, that WordPress actually has caching available, and if you use Nginx, you can cache all of that stuff. But I think this is a much better process for you to have an headless CMS and then be able to integrate with Next.js. So again, in this video, you've just learned exactly how to set up the getStaticPaths and props, how to set up static websites on static pages on your website, and you've also learned exactly how to integrate the Ghost API and the Ghost webhooks with Next.js in order to make sure that you are able to revalidate this on demand. Now, if you want to also learn some of the stuff that I've done here, again, I'll leave somewhere up here after this live video on YouTube a link to a video that I've done just a couple of days ago, where I explain to you exactly how to deploy to Ubuntu using Nginx and PM2 a Next.js website. So you can do that without using Vercel. And also, if you want to learn how to deploy a Ghost instance, I'm more than happy to also do that in the future. So just let me know, and also let me know what you thought about this video in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.